Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep, slow breath. Can you smell the sweet, smoky aroma of roasted sweet potatoes drifting through the cool evening air of a winter night? Or perhaps you can hear the faint, crackling sound of a wooden radio set, softly playing the timeless melodies of Kulthum from a neighbor's balcony. Today, we are going to embark on a beautiful journey back in time. We are going to explore 20 forgotten things from the streets of Egypt in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s that we have lost forever. These are not just objects. They are fragments of our youth, pieces of a world that felt warmer and infinitely more connected. And stay with me until the very end, because our final memory, a simple evening walk by the river, will surely bring a tear of sweet nostalgia to your eyes. Before we begin, let us remember how time used to feel. Back in those days, time moved much slower. We did not rush through our days with our heads bowed down to glowing screens. We looked up. We looked into each other's eyes. Waiting was not a burden. It was simply a part of life, a chance to strike up a conversation with a stranger or to watch the world go by. Some might look back and think we had less because we lacked modern technology and endless convenience. But the truth is, we were vastly richer. We were rich in patience, rich in genuine human connection, and rich in the sincere, unbreakable bonds we shared with our neighbors. The street was not just a path to get from one place to another. The street was our living room, our theater, and our shared home. Life was analog, raw, and deeply beautiful. And now let us remember the unforgettable melody of the Erksos vendor. Close your eyes for a moment and listen to the rhythmic clinking of his brass plates, a sound that used to echo through the narrow, sun-drenched streets of Cairo. He was not just a seller, he was a walking spectacle. He walked proudly, dressed in his traditional wide trousers and a brightly colored sash, carrying an enormous, beautifully polished glass and brass pitcher strapped securely to his back. Do you remember the sharp, sweet, slightly earthy smell of the chilled licorice drink? As children, we would hear that distinct metallic rhythm from blocks away and run out into the blistering summer heat, clutching our small coins. He would bend forward with a practiced, graceful movement, and a perfect stream of dark, foamy liquid would arc beautifully into a small tin cup. The cup was always ice cold, sweating in the fierce afternoon heat, and the taste was a burst of pure refreshment that instantly cooled our bodies. It was more than just a drink to quench our thirst. It was a daily ritual, a moment of interaction with a man who knew every family in the neighborhood by name. We did not just buy a beverage, we bought a momentary pause in the day, a bright smile, and a refreshing breath of community life. Today, those brass plates are silent, replaced by modern refrigerators. But the taste of that chilled drink remains a symbol of pure happiness, from a time when joy cost only a few piastres. Let us turn our memories to the early mornings, awakened by the long, drawn-out, beautifully melancholic call of the Robabikia man. His voice would echo down the narrow alleyways and bounce off the tall residential buildings, a familiar morning soundtrack. He drove a simple wooden cart pulled by a tired but sturdy horse, calling out to buy our old, unwanted items. Do you remember the sheer excitement of gathering an old, torn pair of trousers, a broken wooden chair, or empty glass bottles, and running down the stone stairs to trade them? We did not do this for money. We traded these forgotten items for simple, sweet treasures. He would hand us a piece of sticky, sugary candy, or sometimes a fragile little baby chick that we would try to raise on our balconies. It was a time when absolutely nothing went to waste. We respected the life cycle of things, believing that an object that no longer served us could find a new purpose in someone else's home. The Robabikia man was the great recycler of our childhoods, connecting different lives through the exchange of worn-out goods. His cart was a treasure chest of forgotten histories, piled high with old books, rusty metal frames, and clothes from another era. Hearing his fading voice, slowly moving to the next street, always left a lingering sense of calm, a reminder that the neighborhood was alive and functioning exactly as it always had. Now, imagine the intense, comforting heat radiating from the open shop of the neighborhood makwagi. The ironing man was a staple of every single street corner. He did not use a small electric iron, he used a massive, incredibly heavy cast iron tool that he heated over a blazing gas stove. Do you remember the distinct sharp hiss of the steam when he took a mouthful of water and expertly sprayed it in a fine mist over a wrinkled cotton shirt? It was a true performance. He would grab the heavy, scorching iron, often using his actual foot to press down with immense weight to create the sharpest, most perfect creases in our father's trousers. The smell of that shop was entirely unique. It was the scent of hot, clean cotton mixed with the faint metallic odor of the heated iron and the dampness of the small, humid room. We would stand at the door, mesmerized by his rhythmic, forceful movements, watching wrinkles disappear like magic under his heavy foot. He knew everyone's clothes. He knew who was preparing for a wedding and who was getting ready for a solemn occasion. Getting your clothes pressed by the Makwagi was a weekly ritual of dignity, ensuring that no matter how little money a man had, he would step out into the world looking sharp, respected, and incredibly proud. That simple, heavy iron smoothed out not just our clothes, but the fabric of our community. Let us wander back to those crisp, bitterly cold winter evenings, where the glowing cart of the batata vendor stood like a warm, inviting lighthouse in the dark street. As the sun set and the chill settled into our bones, the thick white smoke rising from his small wood-fired oven was a signal for everyone to gather. Do you remember the incredible sweet aroma of the natural sugars caramelizing and burning slightly on the hot iron grates? The vendor, bundled up in a heavy wool scarf, would pull open the small metal door, revealing the glowing red embers and the perfectly roasted sweet potatoes inside. He would carefully select a large, steaming potato, slice it open, and wrap it in a piece of an old, discarded newspaper. Holding that hot package in our hands was our winter salvation. We would toss it from hand to keep our fingers from burning, breaking off chunks of the soft, intensely sweet orange flesh. The ink from the newspaper would sometimes stain our fingertips, but we did not care at all. Eating roasted sweet potatoes on the street corner with friends was the absolute best way to end a long winter day. It brought a profound sense of warmth that started in our hands and radiated all the way to our hearts. Today, we have sophisticated heaters and fancy desserts, but nothing will ever replicate the pure, simple comfort of holding a hot batata wrapped in newspaper on a freezing evening in the 1970s. And what about our early mornings, standing closely together around the beloved fowl cart on the street corner? The fowl cart was not merely a place to buy breakfast. It was the ultimate equalizer of our society, the true gathering place of the neighborhood. The vendor would stand proudly behind his giant bulbous copper pot, known as the filter, its polished surface reflecting the early morning sunlight. Do you remember the mouth-watering smell of the warm fava beans mixing with rich linseed oil, freshly squeezed lemon juice, and a heavy pinch of ground cumin? Men in sharp, tailored suits heading to government offices stood shoulder to shoulder with men in paint-splattered work clothes. There were no social classes around the kedra. Everyone waited their turn to receive a hot, steaming plate or a quick sandwich stuffed into fresh, coarse, local bread. The rhythmic tapping of the vendor's heavy metal ladle against the edge of the copper pot was the official alarm clock of the city. We would dip our bread directly into the communal plates, sharing stories, discussing the morning news, and laughing before the heavy burdens of the day began. It was a beautiful, chaotic, and incredibly warm communal breakfast. The fowl cart taught us that the most delicious, satisfying meals are not found in expensive restaurants, but on a dusty sidewalk, eaten hastily with good neighbors and a generous, open heart. Let us travel back to the days of pure childhood wonder, brought directly to our streets by the man carrying Sanduk El Donia. Long before the era of smartphones, internet, and endless television channels, this magical wooden box was our ultimate gateway to a world of absolute fantasy. Do you remember how the man would arrive in the neighborhood, calling out loudly and gathering all the children around him? He carried a large, brightly painted wooden box strapped to his back, decorated with colorful paper stars and crescents. We would eagerly hand over a few millims, and press our faces against the small, round glass viewing lenses. Inside, the man would manually turn a crank, slowly unrolling a scroll of beautifully hand-painted pictures. As the images moved, he would chant and sing incredible rhyming stories of ancient heroes, brave knights, and beautiful princesses. We were entirely mesmerized, transported to distant lands and epic battles, our imaginations running wild in the dark interior of that simple wooden box. The storyteller's voice was dramatic, rising and falling with the action of the pictures. We did not need high-definition screens or special effects. We had the power of a shared story and the limitless bounds of our own young minds. Sanduq El Donya taught us how to dream collectively, sitting on the dusty ground, shoulder to shoulder with our friends, completely captivated by the magic of storytelling. Now, let us take a slow, nostalgic ride on the old, rattling tramways that once gracefully navigated the busy heart of our cities, whether it was the iconic blue tram of Cairo or the bright yellow cars traveling along the coast of Alexandria, these heavy iron beasts were the true veins of the city. Do you remember the loud, rhythmic clanking of the metal wheels against the tracks, a sound that you could feel in your chest long before the tram arrived? We would run to catch it, jumping onto the open doorway while it was still moving. The interior smelled distinctly of old wood, machine oil, and the salty breeze coming through the fully open windows. We would sit on the hard, wooden slatted seats, watching the bustling streets slowly roll by. The conductor, dressed in his crisp uniform, would push through the crowded aisles, carrying a heavy leather bag filled with coins. The sharp, mechanical click of his heavy metal ticket puncher is a sound forever etched in our memories. Journeying on the tram was never about rushing to a destination. It was about the experience of the ride itself. It was a time to stare out the window, to let the cool breeze hit your face, to eavesdrop on the conversations of strangers, and to watch the beautiful, chaotic tapestry of daily life unfold. Those slow, loud, magnificent tram rides gave us the precious gift of time, something we seem to have lost entirely in our modern, frantic world. Look up at the wooden balconies of the older apartment buildings, and you will undoubtedly remember the beautiful daily ritual of the Sabt. Before the days of instant delivery apps and rapid couriers, we had the simple woven wicker basket. Do you remember the feeling of tying a thick, sturdy rope to the handle of the Sabt and carefully lowering it down from the third or fourth floor to the street below? Our mothers would stand at the balcony railing, shouting their daily grocery orders down to the neighborhood grocer. "Send up 2 loaves of fresh bread, a piece of white cheese, and a bottle of milk," they would call out. We would place the exact coins inside the basket, trusting entirely that the money would reach the shopkeeper safely. He would place our daily provisions into the basket, give the rope a sharp tug, and we would hoist the heavy load back up, hand over hand. This was not just a convenient way to shop. It was an unbroken thread of deep trust and constant communication that literally tied the community together. The balcony was not a private, closed-off space. It was our connection to the world. We exchanged greetings, shared local news, and gossiped with neighbors across the street while lowering the basket. The Sabt was a symbol of an era where doors were rarely locked, where neighbors looked out for one another, and where the street was simply an extension of our own living rooms. Let us remember the comforting, steadfast presence of the Bawab, the guardian of our buildings, sitting calmly on his wooden bench by the main entrance. The Bawab was much more than a doorman. He was the absolute heart and soul of the entire residential building. Do you remember seeing him there every single morning, wearing his traditional galabea, slowly sipping dark, heavily sweetened tea from a small glass? He had a small wooden radio permanently tuned to the Holy Quran broadcast or playing the evening news. He knew every resident by name, knew all our relatives, and knew exactly who was visiting and when. For us children, he was like an uncle, keeping a watchful eye on us as we played in the street, scolding us if we misbehaved, and protecting us from any passing strangers. In the long summer evenings, his wooden bench became a gathering spot. Men from the building would pull up woven chairs, smoking cigarettes and discussing the events of the day under the dim light of the street lamp. The Bawab held the secrets of the building, settled minor disputes, and provided a profound sense of security that no modern electronic lock or surveillance camera could ever match. Knowing he was sitting there, awake and vigilant at the door, allowed us to sleep deeply and peacefully, wrapped in the warm embrace of a true community. Now, cast your mind back to the quiet, dusty side streets after school, where groups of children squatted on the ground, completely absorbed in an intense game of Belia. Long before video games captured our attention, a handful of beautifully colored glass marbles was the most precious currency a child could possess. Do you remember the satisfying, sharp click of the glass as you flicked a marble with your thumb, aiming carefully to knock your opponent's marble out of the dirt circle? We would come home with our knees covered in gray dust, our fingernails packed with dirt, and our pockets jingling heavily with our hard-earned winnings. Every marble had a specific name and value, depending on the swirl of colors trapped inside the glass. The larger marbles, the ones we called the commanders, were kept safely tucked away, used only in the most important matches. Playing Belia required incredible focus, physical skill, and a deep understanding of street rules and fair play. We argued loudly, we cheered passionately, and we learned how to win with grace and lose with dignity. The street was our playground, our arena, and our school of life. The absolute joy of holding up a newly won, brightly shining glass marble to the sunlight, admiring its swirling colors, is a feeling of pure, innocent triumph that no digital screen can ever hope to replicate. Let us walk once again into the small, dimly lit shop of the neighborhood bakkal, a place that smelled delightfully of raw spices, strong soap, and salty black olives. The local grocer did not have sliding automatic doors or bright fluorescent lights. Instead, his shop was packed from floor to ceiling with wooden shelves holding large glass jars and tin cans. Do you remember the fascinating way he used to weigh our purchases? He had a large, beautiful brass balance scale. He would carefully place heavy hexagonal iron weights on one side and pour coarse white sugar or loose black tea onto the other. He did not use plastic bags. With an incredibly swift and practiced motion, he would twist a square of rough brown paper into a perfect, tight cone, pour the goods inside, and hand it to us. It was an art form. The bakkal was a trusted friend of the family. He kept a thick, worn-out notebook with our father's name written inside, tracking the monthly credit with a pencil. There was no shame in buying on credit. It was a bond of mutual survival and profound trust. He would often slip a small, hard candy into our hands before we left, a silent gesture of affection. Shopping at the bakkal was a deeply personal interaction, a daily conversation about life, health, and family, far removed from the cold, silent, and entirely anonymous aisles of today's massive supermarkets. And now let us remember the overwhelming, incredibly sweet fragrance of white fall, those beautiful jasmine necklaces that defined our summer evenings. As the sun went down and the heavy traffic of the city began to slow, little boys would weave through the cars waiting at the stoplights. They carried dozens of these delicate white flower necklaces strung on thin white thread, draped over their arms like precious pearls. Do you remember rolling down the window of your father's car and letting that powerful, intoxicating floral scent wash over you? Buying a necklace of fall was a daily ritual for many drivers. We would hang it carefully over the rearview mirror, turning the entire car into a fragrant sanctuary amidst the exhaust fumes and the loud blaring horns of the busy street. The little white flowers would slowly open further in the evening heat, releasing even more of their magical perfume. For young couples taking a walk along the river, buying a small bracelet of fall was the ultimate, deeply romantic gesture, costing only a few coins, but carrying the weight of true affection. Those delicate flowers would turn brown and dry up by the next morning, but for one glorious evening, they brought a touch of pure, natural poetry to the chaotic, concrete streets of the city, reminding us to pause and breathe in the beauty of the moment. Let us revisit the holy, magical nights of the month of Ramadan, when the deep silence of the sleeping streets was broken by the rhythmic tapping of the mesaharati. In the dead of night, just hours before dawn, this solitary figure would walk through the neighborhood alleys, carrying a small leather drum. Do you remember the thrill of lying awake in your bed, hearing the faint tap, tap, tap of his drum slowly getting louder as he approached your street? He did not just make noise. He sang beautiful, poetic prayers, and, most importantly, he called out the names of the people living in every single house. Wake up, Uncle Mahmoud. Wake up, little Ahmed. Praise the everlasting God. His voice was a comforting, familiar melody in the absolute darkness. We would rush to the wooden balconies in our pajamas, peering down into the dimly lit street just to wave at him. The Mesaharati was the human heartbeat of the neighborhood during Ramadan. He knew exactly who lived behind every closed door, and his gentle wake-up call was a powerful reminder that we were all united in our fasting and our faith. Hearing his voice fade away into the next street left us feeling profoundly safe, deeply connected to our neighbors, and wrapped in the warm, spiritual blanket of the holy month. Today, alarm clocks wake us, but they cannot call our names with love. Now let us recall the magical, profound stillness that descended upon the bustling streets on the first Thursday evening of every single month. This was not an ordinary night. This was the night of Kulthum. As the clock struck 9:30, an extraordinary phenomenon occurred. The usually chaotic streets, the loud coffee shops, and the noisy balconies would suddenly fall completely silent. Do you remember how every single wooden radio set in the entire city was tuned to the exact same station? Her deep, powerful, trembling voice would pour out of the open windows, cascading down into the empty streets like a waterfall of pure emotion. You could literally walk down a long avenue and hear the entire song without missing a single note, as the music transferred perfectly from one balcony to the next. Men sat silently in the coffee houses, their eyes closed, shaking their heads in absolute awe, murmuring words of praise. Families gathered in their living rooms, sipping hot mint tea, captivated by the poetry and the sorrow of her melodies. It was a collective trance, a beautiful moment of absolute national unity. In those long, sweeping musical phrases, we found our own joys, our own deep sorrows, and our own unrequited loves. For those few hours, the entire country breathed as one single soul, completely connected by the voice of a woman who sang the true feelings of our hearts. Let us step into the lively, fiercely loyal world of the traditional Egyptian kahwa, the local coffee house situated on the corner of almost every neighborhood street. The kahwa was not merely a place to consume caffeine, it was the ultimate parliament of the people, a sanctuary of brotherhood. Do you remember the distinct, sharp clatter of wooden backgammon dice rolling across the wooden boards, punctuated by the loud, triumphant slaps of the checkers? The air was always thick with the sweet, heavy smoke of molasses tobacco, rising continuously from the gently bubbling water pipes. The waiter, a master of balance, would navigate the incredibly tight spaces between the small wooden chairs, carrying a tray full of steaming, dark Turkish coffee served in tiny glass cups. The smell of cardamom and roasted coffee beans was permanently woven into the walls of the shop. Men of all ages would gather here after a long, exhausting day of work to passionately debate politics, loudly discuss the latest football matches, or simply sit in comfortable, shared silence. It was a place where problems were solved, where weddings were arranged, and where lifelong friendships were forged over a single cup of bitter coffee. The old kahwa was a vibrant, living organism, pulsing with the true, unfiltered energy of the street, offering a space where every man had a voice and a seat at the table. Let us remember the dignified elegance of the tarbush maker, a master craftsman working diligently in the bustling, ancient alleys of the old souk. In the 1960s and before, the red felt hat, known as the tarbush, was the ultimate symbol of a gentleman. Do you remember the sight of older, highly respected men walking proudly down the street, their crisp suits perfectly complemented by the deep crimson red of the tarbush sitting sharply on their heads? Entering the shop of the maker was like stepping into a sanctuary of elegance. The shop was filled with heavy, solid brass molds heated by hissing steam. We would watch in utter fascination as the craftsman took a piece of raw felt, stretched it tightly over the hot brass block, and meticulously brushed it until it was flawlessly smooth and completely stiff. The smell of the hot, wet wool and the shining brass polish was unforgettable. Wearing the tarbouch was not just a fashion choice. It was a profound statement of absolute dignity, self-respect, and cultural pride. It belonged to an era where dressing up to go outside was considered a sign of deep respect for your community and your neighbors. When the tarbouch slowly faded from our streets, we did not just lose a beautiful piece of clothing. We lost a piece of that formal, gracious elegance that once defined the older generation of our beloved cities. Now let us return to the purest, most unfiltered joy of Ramadan through the eyes of a child holding a traditional, handmade tin fawanis. Before the flood of plastic toys and battery-operated lights, our lanterns were true works of art, crafted by local tinsmiths in the narrow alleys of the old city. Do you remember the sharp, distinct smell of melting wax and burning metal? These beautiful lanterns were made of thin, shiny tin and panels of brightly colored glass in rich shades of red, green, and blue. We had to carefully open the small metal door and place a real, glowing candle inside. The danger of the open flame only made the experience more thrilling. As soon as the sun set, we would run down into the dark streets, swinging our heavy lanterns back and forth, watching the incredibly beautiful, colorful shadows dance wildly against the old stone walls of our buildings. We would form large groups, knocking on the wooden doors of our neighbors, singing the old, inherited Ramadan songs at the top of our lungs, hoping to receive a few sweet treats or a shiny coin. The flickering golden light of the candle inside the colored glass was mesmerizing. That simple, fragile tin lantern held the true magic of the holy month, teaching us that the most beautiful light comes from real fire, carefully protected by our own small, trembling hands. Let us take a slow stroll through the beautiful public parks on a sunny Friday afternoon, perhaps Al Orman or Montaza Gardens, and encounter the majestic presence of the street photographer. In a time when cameras were a rare luxury, this man was the official keeper of our family memories. Do you remember his massive, incredibly heavy wooden camera mounted proudly on a sturdy wooden tripod? He would arrange our family in front of a blooming flower bed, telling us to stand perfectly straight and hold our absolute best smiles. Then came the magical moment. He would drape a heavy, mysterious black cloth entirely over his head and the back of the camera. We would stare directly into the large glass lens, holding our breath, waiting for the loud, mechanical click of the shutter. The air around his setup always smelled sharply of developing chemicals and damp paper. We would wait patiently in the park for him to develop the image right there inside his wooden box. Finally, he would hand us a small, still slightly damp black and white photograph with beautifully scalloped edges. That single photograph was an absolute treasure. We did not take hundreds of meaningless pictures every day. We took one perfect picture, capturing a moment of genuine happiness, a permanent memory that would be framed and cherished on the living room wall for decades to come. And now let us remember the bright red, intensely sweet taste of sharbat, the traditional rose syrup drink that marked every single occasion of profound joy in our streets. Sharbat was not merely a beverage, it was the official, universally recognized liquid of celebration. Do you remember the excitement when a high school student finally passed their final exams, or when a long-awaited wedding was announced in the neighborhood? The mother of the family would immediately prepare giant glass pitchers filled with ice-cold water, heavily mixed with the thick, crimson rose syrup. The smell of sweet floral roses would instantly fill the entire apartment. But the true beauty of sharbat was in the sharing. We would carry heavy, silver trays loaded with dozens of filled glass cups and walk out onto the balcony, passing the drinks over the railing to our neighbors. We would run down the stairs and offer a cup to the bawab, to the grocer, and even to completely random strangers walking down the street. Drinking the cold, intensely sugary pink liquid was a way of literally tasting the happiness of your neighbors. It was a beautiful declaration that a victory for one family was a victory for the entire street. The sweetness of the sharbat was a reflection of the sweetness of our shared lives, a time when our joy was completely open, entirely generous, and freely given to all. Finally, let us walk together along the gentle, sweeping curve of the Nile Corniche as the sun finally begins to set, the cool river breeze offering profound relief from the heavy heat of the day. This simple evening stroll was the ultimate family outing of the 1970s and 80s. Do you remember the thick, wonderful smell of charcoal smoke and roasting corn wafting through the evening air? The vendors would set up their small, glowing grills right along the iron railing of the river. They would furiously fan the hot embers with a piece of stiff cardboard, turning the pale, yellow cobs of corn until they were perfectly charred and slightly blackened on the edges. We would buy a hot, steaming ear of Dora Mashwea, burning our fingers slightly as we eagerly bit into the chewy, smoky, intensely flavorful kernels. Families would walk slowly, shoulder to shoulder, eating their roasted corn, watching the small wooden felucca boats glide silently across the dark, shimmering water of the Nile. There were no distractions, no screens to look at, just the gentle sound of the water, the laughter of children running ahead, and the deep, comforting presence of family. The Corniche was our collective backyard. Eating hot, roasted corn by the river was a moment of absolute perfection, a deeply peaceful end to the day that reminded us of the simple, beautiful rhythm of our beloved city. As we open our eyes and return to the present day, we must realize a profound truth. We do not just miss the old tramways, the brass plates of the drink vendor, or the heavy iron of the neighborhood tailor. What we truly miss is ourselves. We miss our youth, we miss the feeling of endless time, and most of all, we miss the deep, unbreakable connection we had with one another. The world has moved forward, and our streets have changed, but those golden memories remain safely locked inside our hearts, a testament to a time when life was simpler, sweeter, and deeply shared. If this journey brought warmth to your heart, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video to help keep these precious memories alive. Now, I want to ask you, which of these 20 memories brought the biggest smile to your face? And what is one forgotten thing from your own street that you miss the most? Please share your beautiful stories with us in the comments below.